When people operate from strength rather than weakness, from abundance rather than scarcity, from love rather than fear, they create environments where the best in everyone can emerge. The journey of learning to love oneself first is not a destination but a practice, not a single achievement but a daily commitment to honoring one's own worth while contributing to the worth of others. It is the foundation upon which all meaningful success, personal, professional, and relational, is built. And it is the greatest gift one can give not only to oneself but to everyone whose life one touches. As the candlelight flickers in that ancient Florentine study, the wisdom emerges clear and bright. Love yourself first and watch as your life fills with people worthy of that love. Destroy your weak self and discover that in its place stands someone who cannot be destroyed by others. Someone who has become, in every sense that matters, truly indestructible. The architecture of internal strength, the transformation from external dependence to internal sovereignty, does not happen by accident or through wishful thinking. It requires what Machiavelli would have called a strategic approach, a systematic method of building strength where weakness once resided. Like any skilled architect, one must first understand the foundation that needs to be laid before constructing the magnificent edifice of self-respect that will house a life worth living. The weak self is not born, but created through years of conditioning that teaches us to look outside ourselves for answers to questions that can only be answered from within. From childhood, we are taught to seek approval from parents, teachers, and peers. We learn to measure our worth by grades, achievements, and the reactions of others to our presence. We develop elaborate systems of behavior designed not to express our authentic selves, but to generate the positive responses that we mistake for love and acceptance. This conditioning runs so deep that most people never question it. They assume that seeking validation from others is natural, that needing approval is human, and that basing their self-worth on external feedback is simply the way relationships work. They do not realize that this approach guarantees a life of emotional instability where one's sense of self rises and falls with every comment, criticism, or withdrawal of attention from others. The construction of internal strength begins with the recognition that this entire system is flawed from its foundation. The approval of others, while sometimes pleasant, has nothing to do with one's actual worth as a human being. The opinions of others, even those we respect and love, are colored by their own needs, fears, prejudices, and limitations. Building one's sense of self on such shifting sand ensures a life of constant anxiety and insecurity. True strength emerges when one develops what might be called an internal compass, a reliable system for determining right from wrong, good from bad, worthy from unworthy, that does not depend on external input. This compass is not built through arrogance or the dismissal of all outside feedback, but through the careful cultivation of personal principles, values, and standards that remain constant regardless of social pressure or popular opinion. The development of this internal compass requires honest self-examination of a type that most people find uncomfortable. It means asking questions like, what do I actually believe, as opposed to what I think I should believe? What do I genuinely enjoy, rather than what I think will make me appear interesting or sophisticated? What are my real priorities, not the ones I think will gain approval from others? What kind of person do I want to be when no one is watching? These questions cannot be answered quickly or superficially. They require sustained attention and brutal honesty. Many people discover that they have spent so many years trying to be what others wanted them to be that they have lost touch with who they actually are. The process of rediscovering one's authentic self can feel like meeting a stranger, and this stranger may have preferences, opinions, and desires that seem foreign or even frightening. Yet this rediscovery is essential for the construction of genuine self-love. One cannot truly love what one does not know, and most people do not know themselves in any meaningful way. They know their public persona, their carefully constructed image, their repertoire of behaviors designed to elicit positive responses from others. But the real person, the one who exists when all pretense is stripped away, remains mysterious even to themselves. The process of getting to know oneself authentically is both exciting and terrifying. Exciting because it offers the promise of finally living as one's true self rather than as an actor playing a role. Terrifying because it means abandoning the false security that comes from conformity and people-pleasing. It means accepting responsibility for one's choices and their consequences. It means risking the disapproval of others in service of being genuine. This risk is not merely theoretical. There will be relationships that cannot survive the transition from false self to true self. There will be people who are attracted to the compliant, accommodating version of you, who will have no interest in the authentic, boundaried version. There will be family members who preferred you when you were trying to please them rather than when you were being true to yourself. There will be friends who are comfortable with your weakness but are threatened by your strength. The Machiavellian approach to this inevitable social disruption is to see it not as loss but as clarification. Those who cannot accept your authentic self were never truly in relationship with you in the first place. They were in relationship with their image of you, with what you provided for them, or with their ability to control or influence you. The ending of such relationships is not the loss of genuine connection, but the removal of false connection that was preventing genuine connection from forming. This perspective requires a fundamental shift in how one thinks about relationships themselves. Instead of viewing relationships as something to be maintained at any cost, one begins to see them as dynamic interactions between authentic individuals that either enhance or diminish each person involved. Relationships that require you to be less than your authentic self are revealed to be forms of imprisonment rather than connection. Relationships that encourage your growth and authenticity are revealed to be forms of freedom and mutual empowerment. The construction of internal strength also requires developing what might be called emotional self-sufficiency. This does not mean becoming cold or isolated, but rather learning to provide for oneself the emotional support that was once desperately sought from others. It means becoming one's own source of encouragement, validation, and comfort while remaining open to receiving these gifts from others when they are genuinely offered. Emotional self-sufficiency begins with learning to speak to oneself with kindness and respect. Most people have an internal voice that is far harsher and more critical than they would ever be to a friend. This internal critic has often been internalized from past relationships with people who were themselves operating from weakness and passing on their own self-criticism and judgment. Breaking free from this internal tyranny is essential for developing genuine self-love. The practice of self-compassion, treating oneself with the same kindness one would show to a beloved friend facing difficulties, is not self-indulgence but practical wisdom. A person who is constantly at war with themselves has no energy left for creating a beautiful life or contributing positively to others. A person who has made peace with their own imperfections and is committed to gentle, persistent self-improvement becomes a source of strength both for themselves and for others. This internal peace manifests externally as what others recognize as unshakable confidence, but this confidence is not the brittle arrogance of someone trying to convince themselves and others of their worth. It is the quiet certainty of someone who knows their own value and does not need others to confirm it. This kind of confidence is magnetic because it offers others something precious: the experience of being around someone who is comfortable in their own skin. The development of genuine self-love also requires cultivating a rich inner life. The person who depends on others for entertainment, stimulation, and meaning becomes a burden in relationships because they are always seeking rather than giving. The person who has developed interests, passions, and pursuits that fulfill them regardless of external validation becomes interesting and attractive because they bring something valuable to every interaction. This cultivation of inner richness might involve developing artistic or creative abilities, pursuing intellectual interests, engaging in physical challenges, or exploring spiritual practices. The specific activities matter less than the commitment to growing as a human being in ways that do not depend on anyone else's participation or approval. The goal is to become someone you genuinely enjoy spending time with, because if you do not enjoy your own company, you cannot reasonably expect others to do so either. The strong self that emerges from this process of construction is not rigid or defensive but flexible and open. Because it does not depend on external validation for its sense of worth, it can receive feedback and criticism without being devastated. Because it is grounded in genuine self-knowledge, it can admit mistakes and areas for improvement without losing confidence. Because it is built on authentic self-love, it can love others without needing them to fill internal voids or meet unmet needs. This strength creates what Machiavelli would recognize as true power, not power over others, but power over oneself. The person who has mastered self-love has gained dominion over their emotional reactions, their need for approval, their fear of rejection, and their tendency to compromise their values for temporary comfort or social acceptance. This internal mastery translates into external effectiveness in every area of life. In professional settings, the person who loves themselves first is not afraid to speak up when something is wrong, to propose innovative ideas that might be rejected, or to maintain ethical standards even when doing so is inconvenient. They become leaders not because they seek power over others, but because others naturally follow someone who has demonstrated mastery over themselves. Their decisions are trusted because they are made from principle rather than from fear or the desire to please. In personal relationships, this transformation creates the capacity for genuine intimacy. When one no longer needs others to provide self-worth, one becomes free to truly see and appreciate them for who they are. When one is not constantly monitoring others' reactions to gauge one's own value, one becomes present and available for genuine connection. When one has learned to meet one's own emotional needs, one can offer emotional support to others without keeping score or expecting reciprocity. The person who has successfully destroyed their weak self and constructed a strong one discovers that they have not become selfish or self-centered, but rather more generous and loving than they ever imagined possible. This seems paradoxical until one realizes that genuine generosity can only flow from abundance, and self-love is the ultimate abundance. One cannot give what one does not have, and the person who does not love themselves has no love to offer others that is not tainted with neediness, manipulation, or expectation. This abundance manifests in countless small ways throughout daily life. The person who loves themselves first listens more carefully because they are not constantly planning what to say to gain approval. They ask better questions because they are genuinely curious about others rather than searching for opportunities to talk about themselves. They offer help and support freely because they are not keeping score or building up credit for future withdrawals of attention and care. The transformation from weakness to strength, from external dependence to internal sovereignty, from neediness to abundance, is perhaps the most practical investment one can make in one's future happiness and success. Every hour spent developing genuine self-love pays dividends in improved relationships, increased opportunities, and a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in life. Yet this transformation cannot be rushed or forced like any construction project. It requires patience, persistence, and attention to detail. There will be setbacks and moments of doubt. There will be times when the old patterns of seeking validation seem easier than the work of building internal strength. There will be people who preferred the old, weak version and who will actively discourage the new, strong one. The Machiavellian approach to these challenges is to see them as tests of one's commitment to the transformation rather than as reasons to abandon it. Each moment of doubt overcome strengthens the foundation. Each time one chooses authenticity over approval, self-respect over people-pleasing, internal validation over external validation, the new self becomes more solid and unshakable. Those who complete this transformation discover that they have gained something far more valuable than the approval they once sought. They have gained themselves. They have become someone they respect, someone they enjoy, someone they can count on. They have developed the ultimate security. Not the false security of others' opinions, but the real security of knowing that regardless of what happens externally, they have the internal resources to handle it with grace and strength. This security is not arrogance or closed-mindedness, but rather the foundation for true openness and vulnerability. When one is not afraid of being destroyed by others' opinions or actions, one becomes free to take risks, to love deeply, to pursue dreams that might fail, and to live authentically regardless of social pressure. Paradoxically, the person who has learned not to need others becomes capable of truly connecting with them. The architecture of internal strength, once completed, serves not just the individual who has built it, but everyone whose life they touch. They become living examples of what is possible when one commits to self-development and authentic living. They create spaces where others feel safe to be genuine because they are not seeking anything from them other than honest interaction. They raise the standard of what relationships can be by refusing to participate in dynamics based on weakness, manipulation, or mutual neediness. In this way, the individual transformation becomes a contribution to the collective transformation of human relationships. Each person who destroys their weak self and builds a strong one makes it easier for others to do the same. Each authentic relationship based on mutual strength and respect provides a model for what healthy connection looks like. Each demonstration of self-love gives others permission to love themselves as well. The journey from external dependence to internal sovereignty is not just personal development. It is a form of service to the world. For in learning to love ourselves first, we become capable of offering the world the best version of ourselves rather than a needy, diminished version that drains energy from every interaction. We become sources of light rather than seekers of light, givers rather than takers, creators rather than consumers. And in this transformation, we discover that Machiavelli's insight about the indestructible nature of those who have destroyed their weak selves is not just about protection from others. It is about the freedom to live fully, love deeply, and contribute meaningfully to the magnificent project of human existence. The strong self is not a fortress that keeps others out, but a foundation strong enough to support the weight of genuine connection, authentic love, and meaningful purpose. The magnetic field of authenticity. When an individual completes the transformation from external dependence to internal sovereignty, they create around themselves what can only be described as a magnetic field of authenticity. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. In the dim candlelight of a Florentine study, where the echoes of political upheaval still resonated through stone walls, a truth emerged that would challenge the very foundations of human relationships and personal power. It was not born from romantic idealism or spiritual awakening, but from the cold, calculating mind of Niccolo Machiavelli, a man who understood that the greatest fortress one could build was not made of stone and mortar, but of an unshakable sense of self-worth. The prince who rules effectively, Machiavelli observed, must first learn to rule himself. This principle, though written for political leaders, contains within it a revolutionary approach to personal relationships and self-development that remains as relevant today as it was in Renaissance Italy. The concept is deceptively simple, yet profoundly transformative. When you establish an uncompromising foundation of self-respect and personal standards, you fundamentally alter the type of people who dare to approach your life. This transformation is not merely about becoming more selective or developing higher standards. It is about becoming the kind of person who naturally attracts quality relationships while simultaneously repelling those who would seek to exploit, manipulate, or diminish you. It is about understanding that the weak version of yourself serves as a beacon for predators, while the strong version of yourself becomes a magnet for allies, genuine connections, and mutually beneficial relationships. The journey begins with a recognition that most people navigate their relationships from a position of internal poverty. They seek validation, acceptance, and worth from external sources, creating a dynamic where they become vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. The controller, who seeks to dominate others through fear or obligation, discovers that such methods have no power over someone who is comfortable being alone rather than accepting disrespectful treatment. This repelling effect often manifests in subtle ways. Such individuals may find excuses not to spend time with the authentic person, may feel compelled to criticize or diminish them, or may simply fade from their life without explanation. This is not coincidence, but the natural result of incompatible energies. Weakness cannot coexist comfortably with strength. Neediness cannot find satisfaction in the presence of self-sufficiency, and inauthenticity feels exposed when confronted with genuine authenticity. For the person who has learned to love themselves first, this repelling effect is a gift, though it may not always feel like one initially. It represents the automatic filtering out of relationships that would have been draining, disappointing, or destructive. It saves countless hours of energy that would have been wasted on people who were never capable of genuine connection in the first place. It prevents the heartache that comes from investing in relationships with individuals who were seeking something to use rather than someone to know. Simultaneously, this same magnetic field attracts an entirely different category of people. Those who have done their own work on personal development recognize and appreciate the same quality in others. Individuals who value authenticity are drawn to someone who has learned to be genuinely themselves. People who have developed their own self-respect are attracted to others who demonstrate the same quality because such relationships become opportunities for mutual growth and genuine connection, rather than exercises in mutual manipulation or need-meeting. These attractions often manifest as an immediate sense of recognition or resonance. People frequently describe meeting someone who has mastered self-love as feeling instantly comfortable or immediately understood. This is not mystical but practical. When two people who are comfortable with themselves meet, there is no energy wasted on pretense, manipulation, or the careful monitoring of reactions that characterizes interactions between people operating from weakness. The conversations that emerge in such meetings are qualitatively different from typical social interactions. Instead of the subtle negotiations for approval that characterize most conversations, there is genuine curiosity about each other's thoughts, experiences, and perspectives. Instead of performing for each other's approval, there is authentic sharing of ideas and feelings. Instead of the exhausting work of impression management, there is the refreshing experience of simply being oneself and finding that self welcomed and appreciated. These relationships develop along entirely different trajectories than those based on mutual neediness or the attraction of opposites, that often characterizes weak individuals seeking strong ones to complete them. When two self-sufficient individuals form a connection, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, The relationship becomes greater than the sum of its parts because each person brings completeness rather than emptiness to the interaction. In romantic relationships, this manifests as genuine partnership rather than codependency. Each person enters the relationship not seeking completion but seeking to share their completeness with another complete person. They choose each other not from need, but from genuine appreciation and attraction. They support each other's growth and individual pursuits because they are not threatened by their partner's independence or success. They resolve conflicts through honest communication rather than manipulation because neither person is afraid of losing the relationship more than they value their integrity. Such relationships are characterized by what relationship experts call secure attachment, the ability to maintain one's sense of self while in close connection with another. Both partners feel free to express their authentic thoughts and feelings because they know these will be received with respect even when there is disagreement. Both feel safe to pursue their individual interests and maintain their separate friendships because there is no fear that independence threatens the connection. Both can weather the inevitable challenges that arise in any relationship because their sense of worth is not dependent on the relationship's constant validation. In friendships, the magnetic field of authenticity creates connections based on genuine affinity rather than convenience or mutual neediness. These friends enjoy each other's company not because they need something from each other, but because they genuinely appreciate who each other is. They can be honest with each other about both positive and difficult topics because the friendship is built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than mutual need. They support each other through challenges not from obligation but from genuine care and affection. Professional relationships are similarly transformed when one operates from a foundation of self-love. Colleagues and clients are drawn to the person who radiates confidence and integrity because such individuals are pleasant to work with and can be trusted to maintain high standards. They become natural leaders not because they seek power over others, but because others want to follow someone who has demonstrated mastery over themselves. They attract opportunities because they are known for their reliability, authenticity, and the quality of their work rather than for their willingness to please or their political maneuvering. The magnetic field also operates to attract mentors and teachers. Those who have something valuable to offer are drawn to individuals who they sense will make good use of guidance and instruction. The person who loves themselves first is coachable because they are not defensive about their weaknesses or areas for improvement. They can receive feedback and criticism without being devastated because their sense of worth is not fragile. They are committed to growth and excellence rather than to appearing perfect, making them ideal students for those who have mastered various skills or areas of knowledge. Perhaps most remarkably, this magnetic field tends to attract opportunities and experiences that align with one's authentic interests and values. This is not mystical but practical. When one is no longer expending energy on maintaining false personas or seeking approval for inauthentic choices, one becomes clear about what one actually wants and begins making choices aligned with those desires. This clarity and intentionality naturally lead to experiences and opportunities that fit with one's true self rather than with who one thought one should be. The operation of this magnetic field requires no conscious effort or strategy. It is simply the natural result of becoming an authentic, self-loving individual. Attempts to manufacture or manipulate this effect through artificial confidence or strategic behavior always fail because they lack the genuine foundation that creates the real magnetic effect. One cannot fake the energy of someone who truly loves themselves, and attempts to do so usually repel the very people one hopes to attract while continuing to attract those one hopes to avoid. The maintenance of this magnetic field requires only the continued commitment to authenticity and self-development. As one continues to grow and evolve, the field evolves as well, attracting different people and opportunities that match one's current level of development and changing interests. There is no static state to achieve, but rather a dynamic process of continuing to become more fully oneself, while remaining open to the connections and experiences that authentic living naturally brings. For those still in the process of developing genuine self-love, the magnetic field concept provides both motivation and a diagnostic tool. By honestly examining the types of people and opportunities that are currently showing up in one's life, one can assess how much authentic self-love has been developed. If one's life is filled with drama, manipulation, people-pleasing dynamics, and draining relationships, this suggests that more work needs to be done on developing internal strength and authenticity. If one's life is relatively peaceful, filled with mutual respect and genuine connections, this suggests that significant progress has been made. The transition period, as one moves from external dependence to internal sovereignty, often involves a temporary decrease in the number of relationships as the magnetic field shifts from attracting weakness-based connections to authenticity-based ones. This can feel lonely or concerning, leading some to question whether they are becoming too selective or too strong. The Machiavellian perspective would be to see this temporary loneliness as the necessary clearing away of relationships that were never truly serving one's highest good, making space for connections that will be far more fulfilling and sustainable. This transition requires faith. Faith that becoming more authentic and self-loving will ultimately lead to better relationships rather than isolation. This faith is supported by both logic and the testimony of countless individuals who have made this journey before. Logic suggests that being genuine attracts genuine people, while being false attracts those who profit from falseness. The testimony of others confirms that while the transition period may involve some loneliness, the eventual result is relationships of a quality and depth that most people never experience. The magnetic field of authenticity also serves a larger purpose beyond the individual who generates it. Each person who learns to love themselves first and radiates that strength to the world makes it easier for others to do the same. They create examples of what healthy relationships look like, demonstrate the possibility of living authentically without catastrophic consequences, and provide safe spaces where others can practice being genuine without fear of judgment or exploitation. In this way, the personal transformation from weakness to strength becomes a contribution to the collective elevation of human relationships. Each authentic person raises the standard for what is acceptable in human interaction. Each demonstration of self-love gives others permission to value themselves as well. Each refusal to participate in manipulative or degrading dynamics makes such behavior less acceptable in general social environments. The ripple effects of this transformation extend far beyond personal relationships into every institution and system in which the authentic individual participates. Organizations benefit from employees who bring integrity and self-respect to their work. Communities benefit from citizens who make decisions based on principle rather than fear or the desire to please. Society benefits from individuals who model healthy self-regard and refuse to participate in systems that diminish human dignity. The magnetic field of authenticity is ultimately about more than personal happiness or successful relationships, though it certainly includes both. It is about the creation of a better world through the transformation of individual consciousness and behavior. It is about understanding that changing oneself is the most powerful way to change one's environment, and that loving oneself first is the foundation for creating a world where everyone can be loved for who they truly are. As this understanding deepens, one realizes that the journey of self-love is not selfish but generous, not self-centered but other-serving, not about isolation but about genuine connection. For in learning to love ourselves first, we become capable of offering the world the gift of our authentic presence, our genuine strength, and our capacity to create relationships based on truth rather than fear, abundance rather than scarcity, love rather than need. The magnetic field continues to operate as long as one continues to honor the commitment to authenticity and self-love that created it. It becomes a source of continuous blessing, bringing into one's life exactly the people and experiences needed for continued growth and contribution. And it serves as a constant reminder that the most powerful thing any individual can do is to become fully themselves and then share that self with a world hungry for authentic connection and genuine love. In the end, the magnetic field of authenticity reveals itself to be not just a byproduct of self-love, but its ultimate expression. The way that inner transformation manifests as outer blessing, the mechanism by which personal healing becomes collective healing, and the means by which one person's commitment to destroying their weak self becomes a gift to everyone whose life they touch. Through this field, the Machiavellian principle that the strong cannot be destroyed by others finds its most beautiful expression. They become instead sources of strength for others, creators of connections that elevate everyone involved, and living examples of what becomes possible when one learns to love oneself first. They present themselves as half-empty vessels, hoping others will fill them with the love, respect, and recognition they cannot provide for themselves. This approach, while understandable, creates the exact opposite effect of what they desire. Consider the man who enters every social interaction with an invisible sign that reads, "Please validate me." His conversations become subtle negotiations for approval. His jokes are tests to see if others find him amusing. His opinions shift like sand depending on what he believes will make him more likable. His very presence communicates need rather than value. Without realizing it, He has positioned himself as someone who takes from interactions rather than someone who contributes to them. This internal poverty manifests in countless ways throughout daily life. It appears in the excessive need to explain oneself to others, as if seeking permission for one's choices and existence. It shows up in the inability to say no without elaborate justifications, in the tendency to apologize for taking up space, and in the constant monitoring of others' reactions to gauge one's own worth. These behaviors, while often unconscious, send clear signals to the world about how one views oneself, and the world responds accordingly. The Machiavellian approach to self-love is not about narcissism or arrogance. It is about developing what he would call virtue, a combination of skill, strength, and excellence that makes one formidable in any arena. When applied to personal development, this virtue becomes the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships are built. It is the recognition that you must become someone worth knowing before you can expect to know people worth your time. This transformation begins with the destruction of the weak self, not through harsh self-criticism or punishment, but through the systematic replacement of weakness with strength, neediness with self-sufficiency, and external validation with internal conviction. The process is both liberation and discipline, requiring the courage to face uncomfortable truths about oneself while simultaneously taking decisive action to change them. The first element of this transformation involves developing what Machiavelli would recognize as strategic self-awareness. This means honestly assessing one's current position without the comfort of self-deception or the luxury of self-pity. It requires asking difficult questions. What am I currently offering to relationships? What am I seeking from others that I should be providing for myself? Where do I compromise my standards out of fear of being alone? When do I present a false version of myself to gain acceptance? This assessment is not meant to induce shame, but to create clarity. The weak self thrives in the shadows of self-deception, maintaining its power through vague dissatisfaction and undefined longing. By bringing these patterns into the light of conscious examination, one begins the process of dismantling them. The strong self emerges not from perfection, but from honest acknowledgement of imperfection combined with the commitment to continuous improvement. The development of genuine self-love, as opposed to superficial self-esteem, requires understanding the difference between conditional and unconditional self-regard. The weak self loves conditionally. I am valuable when others approve of me. I am worthy when I achieve something. I matter when someone needs me. This conditional love creates a fragile foundation that can be shaken by every criticism, rejection, or failure. True self-love, in the Machiavellian sense, is based on an unconditional recognition of one's inherent worth as a human being, combined with a commitment to continuously developing one's capabilities and character. It says, I am valuable because I exist, and I will honor that value by becoming the best version of myself. This creates an unshakable foundation that cannot be destroyed by external circumstances or other people's opinions. From this foundation, something remarkable begins to happen in one's relationships. The desperate energy that once characterized social interactions begins to transform into something far more attractive. Genuine confidence mixed with authentic interest in others. When you no longer need others to validate your worth, you become free to appreciate them for who they are rather than for what they can do for you. This shift in energy is immediately perceptible to others and fundamentally changes the dynamic of every interaction. People who are accustomed to dealing with needy individuals suddenly find themselves in the presence of someone who is complete unto themselves. This completeness does not mean isolation or self-sufficiency to the point of coldness. Rather, it means engaging with others from a position of abundance rather than scarcity. The person who has learned to love themselves first brings value to every interaction because they are not there to take, but to share. This shift creates a natural filtering mechanism that Machiavelli would have appreciated for its efficiency. Those who are drawn to weakness, who feed on insecurity, who profit from others' neediness, find themselves naturally repelled by someone who offers nothing for them to exploit. Manipulators lose interest when there is nothing to manipulate. Energy vampires move on when they discover a source that cannot be drained. Users find new targets when they encounter someone who cannot be used. Simultaneously, this transformation attracts an entirely different category of people. Those who possess their own strength recognize and respect strength in others. Individuals who have done their own work on self-development are drawn to others who share that commitment. People who value authenticity are naturally attracted to someone who has learned to be genuinely themselves rather than a carefully constructed persona designed to please others. The practical manifestations of this transformation extend into every area of life. They become more valuable employees and leaders because they operate from a position of integrity rather than fear. They make decisions based on what is right rather than what is safe, and this decisiveness is recognized and rewarded by those in positions to advance careers and create opportunities. In romantic relationships, the change is even more dramatic. The person who has learned to love themselves first no longer settles for relationships that diminish them. They are not afraid of being alone because they have learned to enjoy their own company. This freedom from the fear of solitude allows them to choose partners rather than simply accepting whoever shows interest. They become attractive to healthy individuals who are themselves capable of genuine love, while simultaneously becoming unattractive to those seeking someone they can control or manipulate. The Machiavellian principle at work here is that strength attracts strength while weakness attracts predators. This is not a moral judgment but a practical observation about human nature that has held true across cultures and centuries. Those who have not learned to value themselves inevitably attract others who will not value them either. Those who have mastered self-love create a magnetic field that draws in others who understand and appreciate that quality. The process of destroying the weak self is not accomplished through a single moment of decision, but through thousands of small choices made consistently over time. It is the choice to speak honestly rather than telling people what they want to hear. It is the decision to maintain one's standards even when doing so feels lonely. It is the practice of treating oneself with the same kindness and respect one would show to a beloved friend. It is the cultivation of interests, skills, and passions that make one interesting to oneself before seeking to be interesting to others. This transformation requires what Machiavelli would call strategic patience, the understanding that meaningful change takes time and that temporary discomfort is the price of permanent improvement. There will be periods of loneliness as one distances themselves from relationships that no longer serve their highest good. There will be moments of doubt when the old patterns of seeking external validation seem easier than the work of building internal strength. There will be temptations to return to the familiar comfort of weakness when strength feels challenging to maintain. Yet those who persist in this transformation discover something that Machiavelli understood about power. True strength, once developed, becomes self-reinforcing. Each successful boundary maintained makes the next one easier to establish. Each time one chooses self-respect over approval, that choice becomes more natural. Each instance of acting from authenticity rather than people-pleasing builds confidence in one's ability to be loved for who one truly is. The man or woman who has successfully destroyed their weak self discovers that they have not lost the capacity for love and connection. They have gained the capacity for deeper, more meaningful relationships than they ever thought possible. They find themselves surrounded by people who choose to be in their life rather than people who are there out of convenience, neediness, or manipulation. Their relationships become sources of mutual growth and support rather than drains on their energy and self-worth. In the professional realm, this transformation creates leaders rather than followers, innovators rather than imitators. The person who has learned to trust their own judgment becomes capable of making decisions that others will follow. They become valuable not because they tell people what they want to hear, but because they possess the courage to speak truth and the wisdom to know when and how to do so effectively. Their presence in any organization elevates the entire dynamic because they operate from principles rather than politics. The ripple effects of this personal transformation extend far beyond the individual. Those who have learned to love themselves first become models for others who are still trapped in patterns of external validation and weak self-regard. They demonstrate through their very existence that another way of being is possible. Their relationships become examples of what healthy connection looks like. Their success becomes proof that integrity and authenticity are not obstacles to achievement, but pathways to more meaningful and sustainable forms of success. Children who grow up around adults who have mastered self-love learn from an early age what healthy self-regard looks like. They see modeled for them the difference between arrogance and confidence, between selfishness and self-care, between people-pleasing and genuine kindness. These children often develop a natural resistance to manipulation and a healthy expectation of respect in their relationships because these qualities have been normalized in their environment. The Machiavellian insight that the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others reveals itself to be more than a strategy for personal protection. It becomes a blueprint for creating a life of meaning, purpose, and genuine connection. When one can no longer be destroyed by others, one becomes free to engage with the world from a position of strength and generosity rather than fear and need. This strength manifests not as hardness or callousness, but as the ability to remain centered in one's own worth regardless of external circumstances. It allows for vulnerability without victimhood, for openness without naivety, for love without dependency. The person who has achieved this state can afford to be generous with their attention, energy, and affection because these gifts flow from abundance rather than scarcity. The transformation from weakness to strength, from external to internal validation, from neediness to self-sufficiency, is perhaps the most important journey any person can undertake. It determines not only the quality of relationships one will experience, but the very trajectory of one's life. Those who master this transformation find that opportunities appear where once there were only obstacles, that respect flows toward them naturally, and that their very presence becomes a gift they offer to the world rather than a burden they carry through it. In the end, Machiavelli's wisdom about the destruction of the weak self reveals itself to be not just about personal development, but about the creation of a better world. When individuals stop seeking validation from others and start providing value to others, the entire quality of human interaction improves. This field operates according to principles that Machiavelli would have recognized as natural laws of human interaction, drawing in those who resonate with strength and authenticity while repelling those who seek weakness to exploit or manipulate. The operation of this field is both automatic and profound, fundamentally altering not just whom one attracts, but the quality of every relationship in one's life. This magnetic field is not something one consciously creates or controls. It emerges naturally from the energy of someone who has learned to love themselves first. It is the external manifestation of internal transformation, the way that inner strength and self-respect communicate themselves to the world without words or conscious effort. Like a lighthouse that simply shines its light without choosing which ships it guides to safety, the person who has mastered self-love simply radiates a quality that others can sense immediately upon meeting them. The nature of this magnetic field can best be understood by examining what it repels and what it attracts. Those who are drawn to weakness, the manipulators, the energy vampires, the emotionally immature individuals who have never learned to meet their own needs, find themselves inexplicably uncomfortable around someone who radiates self-sufficiency. They may not be able to articulate why, but they sense instinctively that this person offers nothing for them to exploit and will not tolerate behavior that diminishes either party. These individuals often describe feeling intimidated by someone who loves themselves, though what they're actually experiencing is the recognition that their usual tactics will not work. The manipulator who relies on guilt cannot manipulate someone who has a clear conscience. The emotional vampire who feeds on others' insecurities finds no nourishment from someone who is secure in themselves.